it to episode 3 of Punk Vacation, an unofficial Vinegar Syndrome podcast, where I try to find the joy in unfettered creativity. As you know, I'm trying to make this a podcast dedicated to bringing awareness and context to movies from every budget, from all over the world, and from any time period. I've been a subscriber myself since Black Friday of 2021, and just want to try to build a community here of both folks from VS as well as fans of VS. And in that spirit, I'm very, very, very excited today for episode 3, where we're going to be doing the September announcement drop discussion. I'm very excited to be bringing in one of the OGs at Vinegar Syndrome, Brandon Upson. Brandon, I'll give your background in just a second, but thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very excited about this. So you have many hats, as everybody does in Vinegar Syndrome, but currently you're a film restoration artist, you're a co-founder of the archive, and you are the lead scanning technician. Did I get all that right?
Yeah, yes, indeed. And a couple other things scattered throughout as well, but yeah, those are the big ones.
That's awesome. And you've been there since before Vinegar Syndrome even started.
Yeah, before Vinegar Syndrome, I'm sure most people will remember we kind of got started with a Kickstarter, but or Indiegogo, I forget, but even before that, we were working to be a film archive that preserves and restores for other companies as well. We have done work for Arrow, Kino, a bunch of other companies, and Severin in the past as well. We still do occasional work for them as well, but that's kind of the genesis for that. And then we said, you know what, we probably can do a home video label as well, and especially finding the lost films of Herschel Gordon Lewis, the Massage Parlor Murders, the numerous early adult films that kind of helped start us in Vinegar Syndrome, and yeah, been going ever since.
Well, there's a separate discussion I'd love to have with you just around the maturity of Vinegar Syndrome as a company. It's been so fun to watch, but congratulations on kind of becoming where you are now, this kind of powerhouse.
Oh, thank you. It's it's a whole team involved too. It's everyone from shipping and you know archiving and just the film restoration, acquisitions, and just everyone involved, to get one release out there is a big thing. So we're very thankful for that too, and for the fans to keep supporting this after all these years through the twists and turns of between physical media and the streaming world too.
Huh. Well, I mean, physical media has been declared dead 10 times now, is that right?
Something like that. Yeah, it is sad because like some mainstream, and by mainstream I mean big studios, it's like kind of they want it to be dead, but it never truly dies off. It's kind of like vinyl was 10 years
Yeah.
ago too. It's like, so hopefully we just keep going, and hopefully all this keeps going too.
Well, we'll talk about this here in just a minute, but when you can make 7,000 copies of a new slipcover release and sell another couple thousand standards, I mean, that's not dead, right? I mean, that's
No,
pretty dead.
for our world, it's not. What's sad is that for like a big studio film, I guess it could be for them in a way, but yeah, for us, for other companies, that's a big deal. It always is.
Heck yeah, of course. I mean, that's,
So
we won't, I try not to shit on other people too much here, but, the Blazing Saddles cover that just came out, have you seen it?
briefly, yeah. I've seen. I don't know if it's the
It's,
same. I saw the UK box set too,
no, it's
but
just a saddle that's on fire. That's the cover, right?
oh,
And you're
that's
like, yeah, I mean, you obviously don't care at this point if you're
yeah.
putting, like, anyways. So
But
I love the work that y'all are doing to,
thank
because
you.
you actually do care, right? And you wouldn't have put that cover out.
I would hope not, but yeah.
Because one of y'all have actually seen that movie, it seems
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
So, um, so speaking of how you've grown and stuff, I mean, I think September announcements, again, we're recording this an hour and a half after they've dropped. So, this is it's all fresh for me as well here. But there's some really cool titles that y'all are able to find every month, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
just in this popularity, I guess, of the release at the initial time of release. So I can't wait to get into September here. What I like to do is go over the VS mainline and then the sublabels, right?
Okay.
And yeah, at this point, looks like this month we're going to talk about VSA briefly. Looks like there's a new VSL and a cinematograph and then a distribpix.
Mm-hmm. A distropix, I should say, non-hardcore, that for people who are interested as well.
Okay. Well, it's so, I mean, I will admit to having come into vintage pornography through Vinegar Syndrome. That wasn't like a big part of my movie vocabulary before I found y'all. But there is something different about it. It's kind of, there's some really interesting movies in there. So,
Oh
anyways, it's
yeah, there's I I I genuinely love like a lot of it, and you can't. It's a whole different beast nowadays, but back then, I'm watching it for the plot. So
oh,
it's,
really?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great ones, and it's especially talking about these, like especially like these Blonde and a Bum Trip. We'll talk about it in a bit, but like the early black and white sexploitation when they were still figuring out like what can they get away with, what can they, oh okay,
Right.
we make it kind of educational, it'll be okay, so
Well, I remember the first exposure to watching it for the plot, if you want to say it like that.
yeah, yeah.
I went through y'all's taboo box.
Oh
And
man, yeah.
and I actually had this whole narrative in my head of like them talking about incest as like this disease that's like taking over the community. Because as the movies go on, it like
Yeah,
expands beyond the family into the greater
yeah,
community, right?
yeah. Yep. It gets really wild, my favorite plot of one we released, god, is probably still uh god, there's so many, but Candy Goes to Hollywood is up there, but even stuff, we actually, this was in the out of print section, we found a couple at on the Melusine site. I think it was Dixie Ray, Hollywood Star,
Okay.
where they did a full on period like 1940s. Oh, okay, they clearly rented cars. Oh, okay, they clearly told Cameron Mitchell he wasn't shooting scenes for porn, for his dialogue scenes with John Leslie, but
Oh, that's
or
crazy.
maybe they did and he didn't care. But it was, but it's
Awesome.
one of those things where you could tell they put money into making these big budgets, and obviously, I think there's something too where there is interest getting up with like obviously the big release of a new version of Caligula
Mhm.
that I think can generate kind of new people coming to see these for the first time for that. Oh, okay, there's a film here. It's not like essentially what you see nowadays. It almost reverted back to the stag loops of the 60s and of the 50s and stuff too.
I mean, we'll talk about David DeCocto here in just a second because he's
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
commentaries. But I mean, him and his whole crew came up through porn, right? And then they
Yep.
started making these direct-to-video movies and kind of whatever, he became, which is so cool. So
Oh yeah.
uh, the lineage is straight to Hollywood, right? For all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess taking just one step back, this is another thing that I think is really interesting about where Vinegar Syndrome is now, because the Howling 2 is one movie, Delirium is one movie, and then Cruel Brittania is three movies, right?
Yep. That's
So that means
correct.
five movies that y'all put out this month.
Yep.
That's
Just for the regular subscription, right? Yeah, that's what you get too.
that's crazy. And so your role is, are you touching between you and Curtis and I guess the team that does the restoration, are y'all touching pretty much every one of these?
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time. Now the cinematograph, I helped like checked it out, but really that's all Justin
Okay.
Liberty and his crew of people for the cinematograph release for Go Fish. I know that one specifically, I think was restored. Uh, I want to say it was restored by even like the Film Foundation or someone
Oh,
big like
wow.
that. But maybe, yeah,
One of these, one of the film movement movies that came out through OCN was, um, I know like Martin Scorsese's a big fan of that. I don't know if it was that one, but if it's Go Fish 2, that's cool. Because Go Fish is a huge, we haven't even got to that yet, but that's a huge get for y'all.
yeah. It was. provided by the Academy. Yeah, and so it's this these companies all work together. UCLA Film and Television Archive, Sundance Institute, they all work together to do their own restoration. Sounds like, and it was director approved and everything. It looks great, by the way, too. If people can want to check it out, but it was this really big indie darling,
Yeah.
especially for like queer cinema in the '90s too, and you get a feel like it's you can't even really compare it to something like Clerks, but that's kind of the feeling I had in terms of okay, it's that type of dramedy though,
Hmm.
and I really liked it, and I there's something to love kind of for all of these releases. But yeah, that one was really interesting to see for the first time. Like I had heard of it, but this was my first time actually seeing it too. So that was really cool.
Yeah. No, that's the beautiful thing about being able to go back and restore a lot of these movies is right. I mean, we've talked to on the other podcast I run, They Live by Film. We talk to your partner labels a lot, and this
Hmm.
is something that comes up with like Yellow Veil and Big World and Dark Star.
Oh yeah,
Uh, a lot of these festival movies just don't get distribution unless it's through them,
yeah,
which is crazy.
yeah. It's wild how you've seen like, and we're also talking about not even like really indie films like Yellow Veil and everyone that they put out that they do great work with, but even ones like they're indie in the sense that they don't have like $100 million budgets, but
Yeah.
they still have like multi-million-dollar budgets
Uh-huh,
that were
uh-huh.
like where even they don't sometimes don't find releases either, which is just crazy
It is
too.
crazy. No, I think yeah, Cinematograph is doing a good job of kind of getting in those. There was I know Miramax has a bad name now because of Weinstein, but like what that company did for films with a $5 million budget and under was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep. Hmm.
So if you can detach the company from the head, and just start talking about what Miramax did, is them and Sony Pictures Classics. I mean, they're
Oh
putting out
yeah.
some incredible movies, right? For just 2 million, 3 million, 4 million.
I give prop credit to credits due. I do think that Sony is one of the big studios that's still trying to do good, like really good work with their back catalog, and like with their
Mm-hmm.
like Columbia Pictures line too. I know they've been
Hmm.
doing those box sets. I have a couple of those too.
Sure.
And they did who was it? Not just yeah, they did the Sony Pictures Classics
Yeah.
4K set too, and I think they just announced one. I've heard about it through the Disconnected. Was a American movie on 4K,
Oh, talk about
which
something
is just
hammering for, right?
yeah, that the fact that that's getting 4K, that's amazing to me. That's something like we would do. Like you know,
No, totally.
so seeing Sony do that is awesome.
Yeah.
I really think so.
Yeah. I mean, American movie is such an incredible, like, I hope
Just
everybody gets to watch that.
it's not even a film doc, just an incredible documentary in general. Like yeah, it's I hope other people can see it too. But,
It's one of those ones where the whole time you're watching, you're just like, is this real? Like,
oh yeah, those are
'cause, yeah,
very real characters.
I know. And I
Yeah,
follow Mark, oh shoot. I follow that guy on
yeah,
Instagram. He's still
yeah.
out there. Like, he's still a
Still
celebrity.
still trying to still making it.
Yeah. Because you watch something like And God Spoke, which was another one from that era, and that's clearly like a comedy.
Yeah,
It's great, but it's clearly a comedy. And then you watch American. Wait, what is it? Sorry,
American movie. Yeah,
American movie. Yeah,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
just like, oh my God, this is crazy. All right. Anyways, speaking of crazy, this is what happens when you get two people that love movies talking.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. That's also why there's podcasts too. Is you keep going on this. So
No, no, absolutely. I love it, Brandon. Thank you, man. This is awesome. So let's go here. So we ended August on 477. And so now we're at 478, 479, and 480 in terms of your spine numbers, if you want to think of it that way. I don't know if y'all think about in terms of spine numbers, but catalog numbers, whatever you want to say. Congratulations for getting to almost 500 releases. That's amazing.
yeah, I can't quite believe it either right now. But it's yeah, it's thank you for all the fans out there for making it even possible to keep
Yeah.
going.
Well, speaking of that, so we're going to start off with a movie that was It's got such a cool history. So it's an Australian director,
Hmm.
and it was filmed in the Czech Republic, if I got that right.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
And it stars Christopher Lee, and it's a sequel to The Howling, right? The Howling 2.
Party time! Ow! It's the rocking, shocking, new wave of horror. Howling II.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
So
it's
yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about like
yeah.
getting this
So
film
Howling
in?
2, it kind of like takes the camp level even higher than the first one was originally. But
Uh-huh.
what I love too, and this I know they bring it up in the commentary, is you've obviously Christopher Lee, you had Peter Cushing, they were all big, fairly like lead roles in uh Hammer films.
Yeah.
And I guess before, right before Howling 2, he was only doing really a lot of, again, supporting roles
Mhm.
during the 80s,
Mhm.
and this was kind of his first, like, oh no, it's Christopher Lee as a lead actor in this. Yes, the other actors are pretty all equal, except for Sybil Danning, but like, yeah, everyone uh is pretty equal, but Christopher Lee is like clearly was made as the lead in this
Yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah, right.
So it was really cool to see. But yeah, Sybil Danning as the werewolf is just as the leader, Sturba, that's her name. And it, it's such a fun film. The music gets just in your head too, because it was the punk new wave era too. And I guess another cool little trivia thing is the Czech Republic scenes that they shot were with the concert. I guess they got in some trouble for doing that because
Okay.
this was still under the Iron Curtain at the time, and
Oh, okay.
so they, I guess when the director, he's he says this more in the commentary. He goes deeper into it, but he got out and there was a bunch of army officials or police, and they said, yeah, you can't have a group of like younger people more than I think 5 people or 10 people, and these were big concert scenes that they shot,
Yeah.
and they said, oh, well, you could make it last a bit longer, but I guess you know these these punks and everything, they thank the director for being able to do this and everything, and he's like, I just wanted to make a werewolf film like in the cheapest, the best way I can too, so.
I'm not trying to
And
make a political statement here.
yeah, exactly. And but he succeeded, I really think so. It's a great film. It's a very worthy sequel to the original, which I love too. And but it's also like it's its own beast in a
So
way.
to speak.
So yeah. And it really is a lot of fun. We have just a loaded release with extras. We have all the archival extras as well that has been put out before. This so people should know this is the full uncut version. Uh, Minor spoilers, but it has like the uncut ending, the Halloween ending, we'll call it. Uh, the very extended, um, nudity filled end credits too, and all the other scenes that were cut. This is the original. It's called the international cut, and it had another crazy name too, like
Your sister is a werewolf? Is that the one?
no, that, but it was called something else, like the sorry for the swear, but like the Sturba bitch cut or something like that. It was called something else outside of the US too. That was wild to hear.
Okay.
But no, the Your Sister is a Werewolf, yeah, it's the perfect one, and it's a great one. Sybil Danning's great. Plus there's people show up from like VS classics like Ferdy Main. He's in it too, and he was in the Frightmare, aka the horror star that we put
Yeah, yeah,
out, and he's also in Night Train to Terror. It's
yeah.
him, the devil on the train.
Speaking about like an early release of y'all's, right? That was like one
Yeah,
of the first ones. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So it's got a great cast. It's a lot of fun.
Ah, that's so cool. Well, definitely this is a for subscribers, but for people that aren't subscribers, this is a must buy. It feels like I was so happy to see that. That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of Christopher Lee and kind of the famous British, actors in horror, there is a three-disc set. So for 479, then y'all found some three, I guess, British thrillers and packaged it under a name of Cruel Brittania.
His name has cropped up twice in 3 murders.
Extraordinary.
There are 60 million people living in the British Isles, almost 9 million of them in metropolitan London. I'm no mathematician, but the odds against the same name coming up twice are astronomical.
I see.
There's no law against witchcraft. People think that they can fly on broomsticks. Nobody can stop them.
Yeah, these are all wonderful films. So they're kind of the perfect, if you love like the early 70s British film, like the thriller, this some of these I guess you'd call like proto slashers
Okay.
almost, and they a little bit of giallo vibes too, but they're awesome. Yeah, there's Craze, there's Crucible of Terror, and there's Penny Gold.
That's right.
Out of the three, so Penny Gold is much more of a true like murder mystery crime caper type one. It's got a great cast, great atmosphere. It's directed by Jack Cardiff, who I'm sure a lot of film nerds also know. He was the DP on David not David Lynch, David Lean,
Yeah,
on David Lean's films
exactly.
forever. And but Jack Cardiff was one of those cinematographer, like for cinematography, he shot some of the greatest films ever made.
Yeah.
But as a director, he always directed these like offbeat, crazy, like almost exploitation films. Like
Okay.
he did Dark of the Sun,
Hmm.
Warner Archive, which is I as far as I'm concerned was a pure like big budget exploitation crazy like film. And he's got such a wild filmography, and this is right up there with it. And for obviously for we also have Crucible of Terror. Now this came out on DVD from years ago. We were able to grab it's the last known film print, unfortunately, and we're able to rescan and clean it up a bit too. It
Yeah.
looks pretty good, and it's one of those where it turns into a giallo. There might be some supernatural stuff, but it's also lots of bloodshed, and and it's really great too. But the out of the three, my favorite by far is Craze. And speaking of David Dakota and
Yeah.
yeah, him and David Delval, along with Kim Newman and Stephen Jones, they all do commentaries for Craze. And because Craze is just, you have Jack Palance just being his absolute just craziest in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
But what I love about Jack Palance is he plays all the films, even as these low budget like Euro films, he 100% serious and believes in it. And it's so cool with like him being kind of the leader of this cult worshiping an African idol named Chuku,
Okay.
who you're going to hear his name a lot if you watch the film. And but it mixes that with the obvious killing elements and everything with a police procedural as well. And the cast is just so good.
Stacked like
It's
crazy. Yeah.
directed by Freddie Francis, who was big Amicus namestay as well, and Hammer. And the Craze was great too, because for Penny Gold and Penny Gold, we had to we scanned it in the UK. They did a really great job with it too. Crucible of Terror, like I said, we had the print, did a 2K scan of that. But the Craze negative, that's in our film archive. I we helped clean it up, and I scanned it, handled it, and it was just gorgeous, and
Oh, wow.
actually seeing that and seeing the colors, how it pops, it's great. So hopefully people dig it. Craze, out of all of them, was, I think, the one that had like kind of a shoddy release in the US. It was kind of maybe a bit harder to see, but now all of these can be seen, and hopefully people check them out.
So speaking of that, have y'all ever, and I apologize if you've already done this, I'm just trying to remember, do y'all ever do like before and afters of when you're actually scanning them and kind of restoring them of how much work you do behind the scenes?
Yeah, we have in the past. It's just something that's just like always so hard to think about. We, as in terms of like, we like take the time to make the restoration videos. I know it's something we want to do more of, and we probably will do in the future as well.
Or even
But
just for YouTube Shorts or something. Just it's just so cool to see
yeah, oh
like
yeah, it no, it really is too.
yeah. That's the thing people don't maybe underappreciate sometimes or don't talk about as much. But last night I was rewatching Blades.
Oh yep.
Like that transfer, first of all, the movie's fun as hell.
Oh yeah.
That transfer, it looks like a Hollywood movie.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that one we were lucky too, in that, with, again, Trauma is usually really great about like preserving their
Yeah.
own film too,
Yeah.
and you it's tough with finding these films and making sure that they are preserved, and sometimes you luck out, and sometimes you work with what you get,
Right.
and but we've been lucky in that, like, stuff like Blades looks great, and
So good.
yeah.
No, Crucible of Terror is the one, if I remember, that's um it's filmed in Cornwall, is that right? I don't know if you remember that detail.
Yeah, and it's almost,
Because
I know we
Cornwall's a
don't,
beautiful part of the country.
yeah, and we don't talk about it in the plot at all, but it's not really mentioned. But to me, watching it, it feels almost like a mix of a bit of the folk horror, even though it's not really folk horror at all, but you kind of get that vibe watching
Yeah.
it, mixed with a kind of an early type of slasher too. And it's just one of those like rarely seen ones that I think all three of these are just rarely seen, where people hopefully can rediscover them and see the different styles and the mixes that they were doing in the 70s in the UK. And yeah, they're great.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I that's one I'm excited about for sure. I think it's funny because you don't think that British films would be under seen, but
Yeah.
like honestly, like a lot of British films are kind of underseen
Oh
outside
yeah.
of, right?
Oh yeah. No, there's and not just that, but TV shows too.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Aside from the big ones, I know there's a ton. It's with streaming, I will say you are seeing more of it too. But yeah, one of my favorite like British miniseries too, from way back, not way back, but fairly back, is the Take Your Taylor Soldier Spy, the
Yeah.
original with Alec Guinness. And you know for a while that those were hard to come out, until I think it was Acorn, they put out the Blu-rays of them, thankfully. And but yeah, a lot of these are still kind of underseen.
Yeah. But I mean, even in the genre scene, there's one I saw, I think it was Kino, but it's called I Bought a Vampire Motorcycle.
Oh yeah, yep, that's Kino, yep.
It's such a cool movie.
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
So I don't know. I love the creativity that was going on there. And there's a story where somebody was working for, I think it was the BBC or something like that, and they just
Yeah,
got some friends together on the weekend, and made this movie over 6 months. It's so cool.
that's crazy.
Yeah, there's actually some great stories on that disc because they stole everything. So like all the camera equipment and the sets and everything was all stolen from the BBC or used without their knowing. So
Express permission.
yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
back. But okay, so Cruel Britannia is 479, and then the one that I think is probably going to get the most buzz, just strictly like name recognition wise, is y'all got a new Lamberto Bava movie.
Oh yeah, Lamberto Bava goes full on 80s crazy sleazy Gialli.
Sei bellissima.
And,
And he
it's a
really, yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
please.
it's a great film. It's a great cast between like Daria Nicolodi, Serena Grandi, who people would know from the different various Tinto Brass films and everything she was into. George Eastman is in it, and it's just one of those great Italian, just where like the giallos were kind of running out of steam by the late 80s,
Mhm.
but this one is just so awesome and over the top, and it helps that where they had Delirium, where the killer is hallucinating, and you have that famous cover with the lady who looks like a gigantic eyeball,
Uh-huh.
and it's just a wild film. Definitely recommended for people of or for fans of Bava, especially from his like his demons type thing, where like that type of atmosphere too. You feel it a bit with this. Again, another crazy loaded release with all the archival extras along with brand new stuff too. Um, on 4K UHD, we were very lucky to scan the negative, and it's great.
Y'all were lucky. I mean, I'm sure he was excited to do it anyways, but it's cool that you got Eugenio Ercolani on there as he's just a wealth of knowledge for Italian genre
Oh
film.
yeah, absolutely. And he's been really helping out with getting these Italian extras made and interviews and stuff like that too, along with Frico Rama as well. They've been doing great work.
We have I was talking to Sam Deegan about this from another VSM player here. We were talking about how Lamberto Bava and Michele Soave are two people that kind of wish were making movies like 10 years earlier so that they could have just made more movies,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
right? Because they were
Yeah,
making it right as the time as the studios were drying up in terms of like money. But what they've both done is just so creative and so
yeah.
interesting.
And I'm super thankful Severin was able to like rescue like Della Morte Del More and like the church and the sect and all the great Soviet films. And yeah, there's so many great between him and Bava. There's so many great ones out there.
Good time for 80s horror and 90s
Yep,
horror.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's the mainline releases. I imagine this is going to be a great sales month for y'all. There's a lot of really strong releases in that. Now, one of the things that I think is super interesting, because I'm complete on Vinegar Syndrome Archive as a sublabel, which I just got super lucky and got in early and started buying pretty much as they came out.
Oh, like the early like evil, what was it, the
Yeah, there's the one, sorry, Evil Town or something like that, but it's
Evil
got
Town. Yep, they're Savage Harbor, like the early
Sylvester Stallone's brother and somebody
Robert
else's
Robert Mitchum's son.
Robert Mitchum's son. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yep. Um yeah, I God was I don't even remember. It was Evil Town #1? No,
Yeah, I think
this
so.
I can't even remember at this
I
point.
could pull it up, but it's cool to see because I think the original intent of that was that it was going to be just like a line dedicated towards the things you would find in a video store back in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it kind of evolved into with Vinegar Syndrome Labs doing kind of more archival ones as well versus Vinegar Syndrome Archive, which kind of is doing more and more action straight up
Yeah.
too. Um,
No.
but yeah, like this one for Vinegar Syndrome Archive, An Eye for an Eye, is,
Good.
and obviously we've put out a ton of crazy Hong Kong Cat 3 films. A lot of them
Mhm.
have been released, but this one is up there with the climactic fight scene at the end, where it's just this out of control like triad knife fight that happens. I'm sure it's been online before, and there's a stunt where, and they talk about it in the interviews we have with the crew, where one guy, it looks like he breaks his neck, like straight up just falls out a window and breaks his neck. He did not. And they actually like they're like, yeah, we paused, we're like, you got to go to the hospital, like, even though he was like, I think he had some bruises, but he didn't have like a broken neck or anything, but it looks like he straight up breaks his neck. Like, in it, and that's just like one quick shot within the whole crazy fight scene. But yeah, an eye for an eye is just this awesome, like, triads dealing with power. The daughter of a triad boss takes over this trying to be legit company and has to deal with the cops. She has a cop boyfriend, and um the various triad leaders trying to take over as well. And for Cat 3, which is, I don't know if I'm sure people know by now, but just in case, Cat 3 is the equivalent of like NC-17 here in the US, and it was Cat 3 for the Hong Kong. And now you could get rated Cat 3 just for talking about triads without having the violence. Now this film has it all. It has the triads, it's got the crazy violence and fights and everything too. For a long time you couldn't see like the full crazy uncut version unless it was like super cropped or anything like that, but now we have the full uncut true version, and the director talked about why a lot of the film got cut down. But yeah, I'm hoping people enjoy this one, especially if you're into the action, the crazy, just the wild fight scenes. And there's even some like John Woo style shoot 'em up scenes in it too. So it's got something for a bit of everybody.
I love, the thing that I always tell people about Cat 3 is like, imagine if there's an NC-17 rating, except that filmmakers sort of took it as like a badge of honor for a few years, and they
They
were like,
they almost, I think Sam said this too in one of her podcasts too, where she said it's both a rating, but it's also almost a genre of film itself.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like not like here, where like, yeah, you have things like, okay, occasionally NC-17, but their own thing. In Hong Kong, it's like it's its own genre.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you have actors doing, like Anthony Wong, who did for a while like a bunch of Cat 3 films, and Simon Yan, like everybody just doing all these crazy Cat 3 stuff. For uh but yeah, this one is definitely up there. People could check out the trailer online. We only show a little bit of hints of the fight scene in it, and it goes nuts. So
Well, and speaking of Sam, she did a commentary for this one, right? This is the one she did a commentary. I mean, a video essay for.
video essay on it. No, we actually did a great commentary with I don't know if people follow the podcast on Fire. They do a lot of the, you could tell by the name, the Hong Kong action films and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, yeah. There's a yeah, that's a great one. What was I going to say? The director for this one is a guy named Sing Pui Oh, and
mhm.
he was another one who was a famous cinematographer. And I think he did, if I remember right, he did the cinematography for like Ip Man and some like really beautifully shot, like classical kind of
Oh
Hong Kong
yeah, yeah, and
films.
I think he talks about that in the interviews too. Where again, like Jack Cardiff, you have these cinematographers who make these really wild films on as directors on their own.
Yeah. Somebody watched what the cinematographers were eating there. That's a
I know,
pretty.
right?
But yeah, this is a fun one. That reminds me a little bit. I haven't seen Eye for Eye, God, maybe 20 years. I saw it. I happened to live in Dallas for college, and there at one point there was like 25 or 30 screens for like independent and foreign cinema in Dallas.
Oh
It
wow.
was
Okay.
it was a golden era. It was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they would play a whole bunch of Asian kind of movies at the time, and I saw it there. But if I remember right, Takashi Miike has those three films like Rainy Dog, Leyline, and Shinjuku Triad Society, where you kind of get a glimpse of like the nastiness of the triads.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like this is one of those movies that also kind of is in that same spirit where you get to kind of watch like the nastiness. Like it's not this glorified thing about the triads or this interesting mafia
Oh
organization.
yeah. No, it doesn't glorify it at all.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah.
it shows the everything brutally up close. One thing that did get cut, I know in the original version, I don't know if it was in the version you saw, but one thing that was cut wasn't violence. It was the actual, they show in the uncut version the actual triad like gang handshakes,
Oh
and
wow.
like, yeah, and apparently they were all real. And whoever, the censor board at the time is like, yeah, we're not even, you got to cut it, like actually cut it out, like, or you can't even release it. So it's crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, well, anyways, that's one I'm super excited for. Now, one that I haven't seen but I'm interested in. So, speaking of VS Labs, you brought them up earlier. So this is a new one where it's so I haven't seen Bloodline, but the director and the cast make this a just feel like one that's a must watch. So like it's so interesting that y'all got a Terrence Young film.
Yeah, it's so this film is so fascinating. I guess apparently for Audrey Hepburn, it was, she hated the film apparently, with,
Okay.
but understanding what the subject matter is, you kind of understand why. Basically, for people who have never seen Bloodline, the whole feeling behind it, right up through using Ennio Morricone for the composer, it feels like a big American studio wanted to make a Giallo film in 1979. And by big, like, I want, they want Audrey Hepburn as the lead. They want Ben Gazzara. They want international, cast of Omar Sharif, Romy Schneider.
Yeah.
Uh, you even
Irene
have,
Papa.
yeah, you even have Goldfinger pop up as the inspector. And, but they said, like, we want, like, very stylish. We want it very upscale feeling, but we also want to have snuff films being made, and you're like, what? Like,
They coming up?
um, yeah, and it's James Mason, he's in it too. It's just this wild, amazing film. The we interviewed the second assistant director from Germany, and he actually, the reason it's 53 minutes long, but believe me, he has amazing stories of how the cast were, how the crew were, like, just all these different details about the people working on it, because it was one of those films also where the production just went off in so many different ways. We include two different versions on here. The TV cut, I would argue, is actually the better cut.
It's
And
30
it,
minutes longer, right?
yeah, it's a much longer. Now it does cut down on the violence, obviously the nudity, which is in the full original theatrical version. And but the television version, it's got much more plot development, with like the actors, but you could see where the problems kind of were, in terms of like, okay, they were like, it almost felt like too many cooks in the kitchen type
Mm.
deal. But even then, even the R rate is just, I really like it. It's this kind of fascinating thing where a studio really did take a chance, where they're like, oh, let's make this okay. They had obviously like Eyes of Laura Mars. They had, Dress to Kill, which, are kind of like the big, truly great, like, American giallos, that you could call them that. And Bloodline is in that vein. And it kind of throws in more melodrama and everything, but there is such, it's crazy when you see the sex killings and everything too, were mixed in, and you're like, this is in an you're thinking this is in an Audrey Hepburn film right now. And the whole cast is playing it great and straight, and just fully invested in it too, even if whatever feelings they had about the film, they kept the work great and professional. And it was really cool.
Almost like when Julie Andrews did SOB for Blake Edwards,
Oh,
and
that's right. Yeah.
just
Yep.
filled with profanity and like
Yep.
innuendo, and everybody's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Um, Terrence Young is such a fascinating guy too. Like, I didn't realize. I was just doing a quick check before he made Doctor No and From Russia with Love, and then Thunderball, which is kind of put him on the map, I'd say, like internationally. But I didn't
Hmm.
realize he'd already been making movies for 15 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I knew he was making them for a while. And yeah, but people explained how, behind the scenes, like, people want to work with him, because at that time, if you directed a Bond film,
Mhm.
you were like you were like A plus, like top of your game. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So
Especially in
especially,
London, right?
yeah, and especially the director of like Dr. No and everything too. Yeah. So I guess they did. I might be misremembering. I thought they wanted to get Sean Connery in here, but maybe they obviously, or he turned it down or whatever happened. But yeah,
No.
it's a really great one that I'm again hoping people rediscover it too. That's where VS Labs is really built in with kind of the rediscovery. And like what we did going back a bit, what we did something like Dean Martin's 5 Card Stud,
Right,
where
right,
you're like, oh, a Dean Martin Western, and it's like, well, you're watching it and you're like, this is a slasher film.
right.
It's an
Yeah.
early like slasher film disguised as a Dean Martin Western, you know? So uh but yeah.
No, the VS Labs in general, I mean, the fact that y'all did the Pyotr Shulkin films,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
like,
The
you know,
Apocalypse tetralogy.
those are just beautiful movies, like
Yeah.
amazing. Did you work on the restoration for those, or was it already restored? Those were restored first, right?
We did additional restoration work on all of those, but the Polish film archives, I believe they did the restoration on all of those.
Yeah, because there was a competing release from somebody else right around the same time. I think they had in the region B, y'all had there was another release of it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I
Yeah.
think that y'all had it must have been some kind of work done. It seems like from the archive, but yeah, those movies are just so cool, and I was happy that Vinegar Syndrome put him out because I think the context and the extras and all the stuff y'all did for that is so critical for something like those movies where it's just like this cool piece of history right before, communism fell, and it was so clearly a metaphor, but like it's just, I don't know, these vivid like depictions of a world falling apart. I love those movies so much.
Oh
So good.
yeah, and they're all very bleak, but man, like they still somehow find a little bit of happiness in their bleak worlds. Like you feel almost like um what's the Obio, is it Obio Ba, I think, is the where they're trapped under the apocalypse happened and they're trapped under the dome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I got big, like the whole vibes of it felt like almost like Brazil, Terry
Oh,
Gilliam's Brazil
absolutely.
too. Yeah. So
But
yeah,
like
I
sadder, because it's like
even sadder.
you're
Yeah.
just watching these cracks on the wall and like
Yeah.
you're seeing their world literally fall apart.
Yeah. It's
And
great.
the reveal, sorry, I could talk about these movies forever. The reveal of what they're feeding the like poor people in the
Yeah.
dome is
Yeah.
just bananas, and you're like,
Yeah.
holy shit! As a metaphor, that's just amazing.
Yeah. No, they're wonderful films. Yeah. Hopefully I think we just came out with Interrogation, which is a crazy rough film too, and there's a lot of great ones still down the pike for Poland as well. So
Okay, good. Yeah, I have to go to work for the next year. I'll probably go to Poland one or two more times related to my work. And every time I go, I try to bake in an extra day because I work in Warsaw, and all of these films, the university and the studios are in Łódź, which is like just 90 minutes away on a train. And they have a big archive and like a museum and all this kind of stuff. They're just like so close, but I haven't been able to make it yet.
oh, gotcha.
So one day I want to go. I'm really trying to make it over there.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Um, all right. Anyway, so thanks for the detour. So VS Labs, what a cool background. And there's a commentary by Trey Howarth and Nathaniel Thompson. They always do great work as well. Um, Now we teased this, or we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but it was so cool to see Go Fish coming out from Vinegar Syndrome. So I think this is a good example of how to me, what it feels like the initial mission of kind of like preserving and restoring cinema, although you started off in mostly porn and like exploitation movies, I think that spirit lives on in all the different sub-labels, and this is such a good example of that
Oh
because
yeah,
it's
and like
huge
yeah,
when
and Justin's doing great work with cinematograph, and seeing something like this where yes, we could do an Altman film and rotate and do a very indie,
right.
film like Go Fish too. It's so cool. So another cool thing too about this one is the lead actress, and she's also the co-writer of this, is Guinevere Turner, who
Mhm.
would go on to write, and she also acts in American Psycho as well.
Yeah.
And it was that was cool because I hadn't seen this film, but I recognized the name, and I'm like, oh man, she's familiar. And then seeing her, I'm like, oh wow, she's in and wrote American Psycho, and seeing that was just really wild as well.
Yeah, yeah, really, really powerful writer. And this was one of those ones where I think before it was okay in America to be like really out as a queer person, I think this is one of those ones that sort of was foundational in like building that momentum towards being having like being more mainstream and being okay and like having this interesting like nuance to personalities, right? And the characters and I mean, I'm just speaking in representation in film at least, right? Like it wasn't like
Oh
this is a
yeah,
kind of foundational movie for that as well.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a big, like you said, a foundational one for that. And but what's cool is watching the film. There's these crazy surreal moments. There's these crazy like art and where the art and kind of like the socio-political things mix.
Mhm.
But what I liked about it a lot is most of the film is really just kind of a general about relationships,
Yep.
and you could almost transport it into any type of almost like romance dramedy type films, and but seeing that in this case, I know was really groundbreaking at the time. You didn't really have, you know, anything, earlier, more mainstream stuff really like it either.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Not treating it like a taboo, just sort of saying like here's two people in a relationship.
yeah, exactly. Or going through the motions and trying to figure out if the relationship's going to work and back and forth and all
Yeah.
that stuff too.
It reminds me a little bit of just in that context of Wong Kar-wai's Happy Together, where it's just like it's about a homosexual relationship, but like not really like about it. It's just sort of like it happens to have that, but it could be about any couple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so that's a really exciting one. Now for this one, I hope that because I'm trying to remember which studio was this MGM or which studio put this out initially? Do you remember?
MGM, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did they have this like in a good archive? Like was this in a decent shape when you got it?
Oh, like I said, this one it looks like it was restored. So when I saw it, it was already restored,
Yeah.
and it looks great, and the restoration looks great, all of that. So just from what I could see, I'd imagine the elements were in really good condition. So it does help that they're from 94,
Yeah.
which it's crazy to say, oh yeah, 30 years ago now. But in like our field for film preservation, that's not that old, thankfully. At least in my experience. Where
Especially if it's in good conditions.
yeah, it's crazy when we occasionally work on stuff from the 50s now, and that is, yeah, like close to 70 years old now, and it's so I feel a little bit more like much more uh what's the word, like want to be dealt, handle it much better. We handle the film, perfectly as well as we can, whatever, regardless of the year. But
Sure.
with that, we obviously want to take a bit more time on it too.
Sure. I'm still waiting for VS Labs to put out a silent film. I want to see when that happens.
Oh yeah, you never know. That's,
That's what I'm hoping for one day. But speaking of early films, it's not quite silent films, but early films and kind of influential films. The Distrib Picks movie this month is really interesting, and we kind of already teased it and talked about it. Um, but you know, I guess how was this one when you got it? Like, because this came in, you had the original negative to work with on this. So was
yeah.
this one in decent shape?
Yeah. No, the something weird. They kept really good condition for a lot of this stuff, and you know, we talked about a bit about this in the people have the Lost Picture Show against the Grain documentary too. Is how Stephen Morowitz, the owner of Distripix, they worked with Lisa Petrucci, the owner of Something Weird, and worked together to get all these films into our film archive now, and it's just fascinating to see these, because these are all like Blonde on a Bum Trip and many others were the early black and white, where they were still trying to figure out sexploitation, and were mixing it with like uh not white coder films, but like making them semi-educational, or like what film noir used to do is, yes, you could follow a gangster, but they have to meet their end no matter what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
At
right.
the end of the film, they either have to be killed or captured, type deal. You kind of had a little bit of this, but they were starting to push it harder, and do for this film especially, yes, it's exploitation, but they really wanted to mix in the early. It's definitely one of the earliest psychedelic films, where you like stuff like The Trip, and films like that, and LSD scare films
Yeah.
are a big one, which are we have some interesting ones that are extras on this disc from the Something Weird archive. And yeah, it's just a wild, crazy film. Now, what's awesome about this film too, though, is the soundtrack, especially if you like the like late 60s rock of but they have bands like the E-Types, and as well as the Vagrants are on here. And yeah, hopefully people can really get into this one too.
And there's two full audio commentaries, and I'm assuming that a lot of the commentaries are just kind of going into the history of what was going on around the era and kind of where this fits in.
Yeah,
Uh,
and how it was made too, and especially, yeah, the influence on it. It is a shorter film, but it's only like an hour and 4 minutes long, but it's definitely worth your time too to check out.
Well, we did it, Brandon. That's the releases for Vinegar Syndrome. At least the main line and the sub labels for September. I can't wait to get these in and start watching them. Um, I feel like the only thing I want to just kind of ask you about is I would be remiss to not talk about the fact that on your website we can now buy two Kenji Fukasaku movies.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about that too for the partner labels.
That's
Again,
crazy.
talk to Justin about these partner, yeah, because he can go into the stories and histories of all these. But yeah, Kinji Fukasaku on the site is just, that's always a great day. So
One of the movies, Wolves, Pigs, and Men. That's an amazing movie. Like people are going to be talking about that, I think, a lot after it comes out.
yeah, oh yeah, no, they're, yeah, Film Movement. I mean, I followed them since even before they were a partner label, when because they did like the US release of The Great Silence.
But see this is the interesting thing about Film Movement that I'm curious I don't know if you know much of their story, but a lot of the movies in the partner labels, the OCN, have like kind of a spine system. They don't. I mean, they technically do have numbers, but it doesn't seem like they're released in an order. But it just more seems like here's just these amazing films. Like last month, Scarlet Diva came out, the Asia Argento movie, which is awesome. And then the Lee Chang Dong. Like it
Oh
just
yeah,
it
yep,
every month there's like these amazing, really cool, speaking of Sony Pictures classics, like it feels like that era of just like let's just put out a bunch of amazing kind of mid-level budget productions that made a splash on the festival scene. So I'm really
absolutely.
loving that partner level.
Oh yeah, no, they're great. Among just we're very lucky with working with all these partner labels that we have, and it's you can find something for everybody. You really can.
That's cool. Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot by this, and if you don't have an answer off the top of your head, it's totally fine. But I do want people to celebrate back catalog as well as like new releases, right?
Yep.
Because 480 movies now in your main line. So, is there a back catalog title or two that you always point people to if they're like, what should I watch from Vinegar Syndrome? Like, is there anything that kind of jumps out to you? I'm sure they're all your children and they're all amazing, but
So I'm gonna let me see here. I'm gonna look at the list.
do you have your own VS checklist?
Yeah, it's one that's I'm gonna go to the ones that speaks to me. Um, so Sudden Fury is always one. It is sold out now, unfortunately, but it's one that was really great. But with that in mind, one that I want to bring up that is still just so great. And I really hope people like give it a chance too. Is um Here it is. Flesh and Fantasy, which was on
Oh,
VS Labs. Now it's not that old, but well, it is an old, very old film in terms of that. But it's one where we it's just one of those great like anthology films. It's supernatural without being not. It's not really horror per se, but it does have that supernatural feel in it, and it's one I think people can check out for. It's it's in the out of print section, so it's probably going to go out of print soon. But going back to regular VS, the back catalog, one I always bring up is well, there's two. Hang on, let me make sure it's
while you're looking that up, Flesh and Fantasy I love because it has sort of like light surrealism to it as well.
yeah.
It's just such a cool movie. I'm glad you brought that one up. It's a
Oh yeah.
really, really good, interesting movie.
So two in our back catalog that I bring up. I know some people aren't the biggest fans of, but I will defend these with my
Let's
I
do
will
it.
go over the hill with them. Flesh Eater, the
Oh, nice.
4K for Flesh Eater, and Massage Parlor Murders.
Heck yeah.
Those to me are still just the greatest examples of actual film preservation and restoration. And that we have the negatives in our film archive. We found these, and we've done our best restoration possible. And I love the films. I've met many people who hate Flesh Eater, like hate it with a passion, and I kind of get where they're coming from too, because I think they expected, oh, it's the zombie, the zombie from Dawn of the Dead made a film, and you're
Mhm.
like, oh, I didn't know he was going to remake Night of the Living Dead essentially
Okay, okay.
his own way. But I genuinely love Flesh Eater. It I look at it oddly enough more as a weird sequel to pseudo sequel to Night of the Living Dead that
Oh, hell yeah.
happened away from Dawn of the Dead type deal too.
Okay.
And I really love it. I love Massage Parlor Murders just for the fact that it was one of those films where until we put it out, it was truly lost. It never got on VHS. The trailers were floating around for it at the time, but that was it. You couldn't see the film otherwise. So um yeah, those are my two picks for
I love it.
back catalog.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this, Brandon. This is exactly what I hoped it would be. This is such a fun way to go through the new releases with someone that knows all the details behind the scenes. So thank you.
Awesome, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, wow. Just huge thank you to Brandon Upson for coming in. What a joy to be able to speak to a historian of Vinegar Syndrome, someone who's been there from the beginning. I definitely want to bring him back, so let's hope Brandon comes back at some point. Um, Now we're going to do something a little bit different today that I'm excited about. So I've got I think y'all have heard me say on this the first two episodes, I'm looking for somebody who can talk about the merch that VS puts out because they put out some sweet merch. I know a lot of people love the shirts and they always have something unique. But I just don't really, I'm not really much of a merch person. I have a small place that I live in, and kind of like the minimalist design, even though the movies certainly get in the way of that to some extent. But it turns out that Ryan Verrill, who anybody that knows me from podcasting knows I'm a big fan of him. We've done a lot of work together. But him and Jeremy Long are both big merch people. So, what I want to do again to make this a sense of community and not just about me, I want to have them host a monthly segment. They're calling it Merch Mates. Super excited that they're doing this. And basically, they're going to highlight the merch every month. So I teased at the end of last episode that there's going to be some new segments coming in. This is one of them. It's about an 8 or 9 minute segment called Merch Mates. So let's see what they've got to say.
Hello there, and welcome to the newest installment of the Punk Vacation podcast. This is going to be called Merch Mates as we cover all of the OCN distribution merch. My name is Ryan Verrill, and you may know me from the Disconnected podcast and YouTube channel.
And my name is Jeremy Long, and you may know me from the Disconnected podcast and YouTube channel.
I love that. It's not like you have any credits at all.
And I also write movies and make television and do
But
stuff.
enough about that. Let's get into the newest merch that dropped during the VS Totally Rad sale. And then, of course, they had new stuff drop on September 1st, which crazy that we're getting all the way into this part of the year, because pretty soon we're going to be doing the pre-orders for the Black Friday sale already. So first up, they had to have a Totally Rad inspired t-shirt based on the movie Rad. And I got to admit, this is a pretty dang great design. I do like the yellow shirt rather than the black shirt because we get far too many of those. What do you think of this one?
I also like the yellow shirt because yellow is my favorite color. And almost my entire wardrobe is black and blue, mostly black. So I like to spice it up with some color now and then. So I do like that shirt quite a bit. And I would like to add that I'm not even a fan of Rad, and I still like that shirt.
And then, of course, they dropped a Back to School themed shirt, and it is Vinegar Syndrome. And below that, they've got the VS logo in a picture of a head coming out of a backpack. Which this is a pretty cool design. I like this one.
I like that shirt too. If I didn't already have enough Vinegar Syndrome shirts to wear a different one every day of the week for a month, I would probably buy it.
Well, do you have enough Cinematograph shirts? Because they dropped a couple new things, including a shirt and a tote bag. And the style that they went with on this one, they titled it Minimalist Geometry. And this one is an interesting design. And Cinematograph has done pretty well with their shirts so far.
I don't know if I have any Cinematograph shirts. So I probably should actually get this one because I really like the work they're doing so far and the releases they've been putting out. It would be good to represent them.
The other big thing on the Vinegar Syndrome website to really highlight this month is that they brought back a bunch of their slipcover protectors. I've used these for steelbooks, for other releases. I've used these on some of the bigger things like the VSAs, and they're rather nice. If you are somebody that you maybe not for every release, but maybe you want to protect a handful of releases that are extra special to you.
Yeah,
these are a fairly cheap way to do it. There are some other websites that are able to sell these, but if you're really only going to grab a couple, this is a fairly simple way just to add to your order if you're already going to be ordering from Vinegar Syndrome. Do you use any of the slipcover protectors? I don't think we've ever talked about that.
No, I never have. I mean, every now and then, if I've ordered something and it's come in one, like maybe from an eBay seller or something like that, I'll keep it in there. But I have never actually gone out and gotten any myself. But I probably should, because I've had stuff damaged because I didn't have them in protective cases.
Right.
So it'd be a journey for me to go about that, but I probably should.
The other site associated with Vinegar Syndrome, of course, is Melusine, and I still think they win the award for Best Merch of the Month because they are putting out a Pretty Peaches lip balm, and it's designed pretty dang well. It's $6, which that's maybe a little high for lip balm, but they're going through the process of printing their own stickers and branding it and everything like that. I gotta be honest, it's kind of nice.
I've never used lip balm in my life, so I have no idea if that's overpriced or not. I mean, it's got it's got a great front cover to the whatever you call it, the lid.
You're making this great. Melusine also listed a brand new Master of Gay Erotic Manga Volumes 1 and 2 Slipcase Edition,
Wow.
which is a lot, obviously. But they are going all in on this. This thing is $65, but it looks incredible, like some of the higher priced comics that Vinegar Syndrome was doing previously.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legit release. They didn't just throw it together. It's worth $65. It's got the hard case to it.
Yeah.
I mean, as a comic book purchaser for many years, that's a pretty standard price, I would say.
So moving forward, we're going to be talking about and reacting to some of the merch announcements that come out during every month for Vinegar Syndrome and OCN Distribution and everybody else associated with them. Since this is our first segment, Jeremy, to put you on the spot, what is your favorite piece of merch that they have ever released?
The first segment of Merch Mates.
First segment of Merch Mates.
2 seconds before we record. Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here doing this and this inaugural episode of Merch Mates.
I still can't believe I had to pay you $12 just to sit down in front of a mic.
Yeah, and it might even be less than $1 a minute, which I win. Thanks, Chris, for having us. My favorite piece of merch, even though I don't actually own it, I wish I did. And it's a big joke for longtime followers of the Disconnected that I don't own it, and it's probably the New York Ninja Star.
Ridiculous.
I mean, it's cool. I don't know if I would have actually bought it for that price, but it's a really cool thing to have. And I like that movie a lot. So I think that's a unique piece of merch. There's a lot of shirts, and I could choose a favorite shirt or a favorite bag or something, but I think that's a really unique piece of merch that I wish I had.
Well, then I'll do that since you listed shirts. I'll list one of my favorite shirts because I have a ton of them, too many of them. And
Yeah.
I think my favorite shirt literally now is the Jaws-inspired shirt that they released just earlier this year. It's one that thankfully doesn't have any nudity on it, so I can wear it in front of my kids. And it is just a really well-designed shirt, and it's comfortable, just like all of the OCN shirts. Yeah, happy with it.
I do, as I mentioned earlier in this recording, I do have a lot of their shirts as well, and it would be tough to pick. But I guess if I had to pick, since you just did, as previously mentioned, my favorite color is yellow. They released a one on yellow a while back. You probably remember it, Ryan, where it basically just had a lot of kind of main characters from a lot of their releases in like a big a crowd. They were all
it was a borrowed design, I believe, from the anniversary line that they did. They put out a catalog back in 2017 or 2018, I think, and it had a lot of the same designs on that. And they've been going with that design a handful of times. They did a couple posters of that, I believe. They've done a couple of shirts, and
that I liked a lot because
the yellow one's pretty nice.
Well, it's yellow, number one, but I also like it, and of course it's comfy and soft and everything that you mentioned earlier, like most of their shirts are. But I just like, I like a lot of the other ones too that, would just have the logo or, some kind of cool design like the Jaws one you mentioned. But this one kind of represents, a good chunk of specifically their early catalog. And it's kind of cool when you're wearing the Vinegar Syndrome shirt to have like all those characters on there. And that's something that I like a lot. It reminds me of my Nickelodeon shirt where it has just a bunch of Nickelodeon show characters all bunched together in a group very similarly.
Does your Nickelodeon shirt have like 5 visible nipples on it, like the Vinegar Syndrome one?
I added those with magic marker.
Smart. I hope Patrick Starr got all 5 of those.
I gave Cat Dog some extra nipples.
Well, that is utterly disgusting. This is an incredible time. I can't wait to be able to talk about this with you every single month. I hope everybody tuning in has enjoyed not just the brand new Merch Made segment of this podcast, but the entirety of Punk Vacation, which I'm so proud to have on someone's favorite productions podcast network.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to Chris for having us on here, and from Ryan and Jeremy from
Beautiful. Honestly, if I had known that they'd made a New York Ninja throwing star, I might have bought that. That actually sounds pretty sweet. Okay, so now what I want to do is just end it on 2 quick hits. Every time I'm able to talk about back catalog stuff from Vinegar Syndrome, I want to do that. So let's start off by revisiting the Human Tornado segment. Love that song. We're going to talk about blades. So some of y'all have heard me say before, 1989 I think is the best year in film. Now, a lot of people are going to argue with me and say that there's better years, and I'm here for that argument. I love a good, healthy discussion. But for me, nothing beats 1989. There was something magical in that year where it just had the most batshit, crazy, fun, interesting movies that were all coming together. And one day, maybe if there's interest, I can post a list of all the movies from 1989 that I like. But I just love that year of movies. And for me, it's the best year. Every movie's so fun. And I think Blades from Troma is a great example of why. So if anybody hasn't seen it, first of all, it's a pretty good looking movie. So Vinegar Syndrome worked with Michael Hertz and Lloyd Kaufman to get this restored. And it looks like a Hollywood satire from the 80s. Like the quality of this transfer is awesome. And it doesn't really look like Class of Nukem High, or it doesn't have the same tone as like Tromeo and Juliet. Like this feels like a Hollywood satire, first of all, which is cool. Just knowing it came from Troma, they really nailed the aesthetic of essentially it's a Jaws ripoff. I want to say it's pretty close to being a scene for scene Jaws ripoff, with the animal in question being a possessed lawnmower that's mowing down people playing golf on this one really nice golf course. And there's, where in Jaws they're trying to not warn the public because there's it's like summertime and there's a big, a bunch of events down on the beach. In Blades, there's a big tournament there. A lot of the same things, right? So it's a very similar movie to Jaws, but it's actually a really well-written, funny satire. Great spoof. I love, I'm saying this from a place of loving Troma. It doesn't feel like a Troma movie. Like if somebody had said, if you like Airplane and you like Kentucky Fried Movie, there's this other one called Blades, made by the same people, I think anybody would believe it. It's just a good spoof. So Blades is the one I want to call from the back catalog. It is VS title 371. So it wasn't released, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, give or take, year and a half ago. There's still just a few slipcovers left, not many. And obviously it has a standard edition, so you can still get it in any sale or anytime you want to, whatever. Yeah, but Blades. This is also just by coincidence the one that I recommend for people wanting to dip their toes into Troma. I think it's a great way to start if you have no Troma experience. Okay, so final segment here. Something that is very, very near and dear to me, a segment that I want to call Convincing Holly, where I defend a film I love to someone I love who would most likely not love this movie. And I hope by doing this segment, I don't mean to make it just about me, but I hope that y'all understand that it's intended to show movies that I think when you first hear about them, you may feel like, either because it's rough or because maybe it sounds just like not that interesting or whatever. Something about it doesn't appeal just when you like first hear about it, but as you watch it, it just like blows you away. Okay, and this is one of the things I think that Vinegar Syndrome does as well or better than anybody out there, to be honest. I think they find these true gems. And so the one I want to highlight today, I'm taking all the way back to VS7. Okay, seventh release. It's a movie it's called The Telephone Book, not to bury the lead. This is a movie that was written and directed by somebody who would go on to write for Saturday Night Live. Nelson Lyon is the name of the artist, the filmmaker. Nelson's sort of famous for being with John Belushi when he passed away. So some pain around the name for some people. But he was, if we just focus on like the creative side of Nelson Lyon, he had this really interesting sense of humor, like a really kind of dark and twisted, but honestly funny sense of humor. And it's on display in Telephone Book. So Telephone Book has the core premise is just about a guy, like a predator, who calls up women for phone sex, but he just calls random numbers out of the phone book, right? And he just starts getting extremely explicit with them. And obviously a lot of the women are uncomfortable, but he happens to find one who really loves this. And the way the movie plays out, she loves it so much that she wants him to call back, and he does. And they kind of get into this weird kink style of relationship. And she wants to find him. And he says, well, it's under the phone book. My name's under the phone book under John Smith. So she looks up how many John Smiths there are, and she goes on this like odyssey to find him. And it takes her through all this crazy journey. And she ultimately does find him, and then it just kind of gets weird from there, even for an already weird movie. But the thing that I love about it, and a reason I'm going to recommend this so strongly, is twofold. Number one, the artistic sensibility in this movie is just off the charts. Visually, this movie is so stunning, and it's way more artful. It almost feels like something coming out of The Factory, to be honest, like Warhol's, The Factory. Like you see a scene where she has all this stuff that turns her on plastered all over her own walls, and floor and just all over her room, but it's done in such a way that it's just beautiful and interesting image. And I think that's true for a lot of the images in this movie, like the staging and everything is just so well thought out and so well put together. Like it's shocking that this is not a more well-known movie, I think. Um, so that's one. Just visually, this movie is fascinating. And the second thing is it's truly funny as well. Like I think because Nelson Lyon doesn't represent this as a form of abuse, but as a form of sort of somebody with a kink finding their partner who also shares that kink, and it's like a celebration of that. He's able to push, I think, the boundaries of what would typically be acceptable in a movie, and do it in a way where the woman in question here, although this is a difficult topic of somebody who's uh, having some form of kind of sexual abuse on women as his hobby, right? But because he finds this woman that they share it, um, it takes it to a really interesting place, and I think their power is equal in the movie, which is cool. Um, and you don't always see that in a film like this. So I think, please somebody correct me if you think I'm crazy, but for me, like it's not so much a movie about sexual like power or abuse as much as it is two people with this really kind of interesting kink finding each other and like a celebration of that. And because the art is so beautiful and there's even a crazy animated sequence in the end, this film, it's probably worth mentioning this film would not have been rated X if they took the animated sequence out. So it would have been an R-rated movie. It's on par with maybe something like Candy in terms of like a movie about sex where they don't actually show a lot of it. Um, but yeah, it's just I love it. I don't know. It's just a movie that absolutely blew me away. And I think even for anybody trying to get into Vinegar Syndrome, this is one that I would put there in the top five of ones you would start with, because it just shows, I think, the number one, the curatory like ability of the founders, considering this is number seven of release, but also the type of movies that if you like this, like just then you can just kind of say like just trust Vinegar Syndrome. And over time, of course, over 480 movies that they're up to now, there's going to be some that you won't register with, but for the most part, they do find great movies or movies with great stuff in it. And I think Telephone Book is a good example. Okay, I mean, look, y'all, we did it. Episode 3 is in the books. Thank you so much to Brandon. Thank you so much to Ryan and Jeremy. We're going to continue to have new and exciting guests. I wish I could spoil the guest for the 15th, but it's going to be one that I know y'all love. And there's also a new segment that's coming in on the 15th as well. That's going to be a recurring segment every 15th. And it's going to be related to the adult titles. And I'm so excited about that. There's going to be a different host. I'll let them announce it whenever they want to, but hopefully they'll announce it here pretty soon. And yeah, I just can't wait. I think this is going to be, I think this is shaping up to be a podcast that's not just about me, but it's about the community of people that love Vinegar Syndrome and all that it represents. And that's really what I wanted from the beginning. So I'm stoked where this is going. It's still early days. For those that found us already and are here, thank you so much. Please find me online, find me on Instagram, find me on Reddit. I'll put all the links in there. Find me on Letterboxd if you want to. Whatever, just I'd love to talk about it and see what you think about the show. Okay, thanks y'all. See you next time.